Hello, and welcome to the next episode in our Gifted Education series. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on tips and strategies for advocating for your high ability student. My name is Dr. Jo Tuite, and to give you a little bit about my background, I have worked in the field of gifted education for about 35 years, and my educational background kind of runs a broad spectrum with undergraduate degrees in business administration as well as sociology, master's in educational administration, and my doctorate is in educational leadership with a focus on gifted education. Lending context to my educational background, though, are my four kiddos. My kids kind of uh, range across a spectrum of educational needs, including needs for special education services. I have a creative thinker, a high achiever, and a high ability student. So with that bit of background, let's just go ahead and jump right into our topic and start talking about those different tips and strategies for advocating for your high ability student. As we talk through this topic today, I will be drawing from the resources that you see on your screen there, and I believe I've marked them on each slide as well, so you can see at least a primary source that I'm utilizing for each of those pieces of information, if you will. Our plan for this episode is to talk a little bit about the challenges we face in terms of advocacy, and then we'll kind of jump into the topic and I'll share with you some of the information that I would recommend gathering. We'll talk about how to prepare, some of the myths that exist out there in terms of high ability students and how that might then impact or affect the process of advocating, and then how to actually jump in and get that conversation with the school system started. I'm also going to provide you with a checklist from the book Gifted Child Decoded, a book that I highly recommend. So let's go ahead and advance that slide. So one of the challenges that exists out there in terms of high ability education that will specifically impact your work in advocacy is that of kind of two overarching philosophies: equity versus excellence. In society as a whole, we tend to celebrate those that have exceptional skills. You can see on your screen there, I have pictures of football great Peyton Manning. We have also theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, and then I've also added the poet Emily Dickinson. These are three good examples and three very different areas of those that kind of exemplify their fields. They've kind of set that bar, that high bar, and we celebrate them and their accomplishments within those fields. Within the realm of K-12 education, though, excellence, which would be likened to our high ability education, high ability students, is often kind of seen as elitist, if you will. Gallagher suggested that it's that appearance of genetic unfairness, kind of that the genes that were given at birth, which is kind of that underlying cause of inequitable treatment of our high ability students. Because let's face it, it's much easier for us as parents to accept a social condition instead of blaming an unfair universe. So as parents, as you're walking this journey of high ability education, keeping this construct in mind of this kind of unfair universe of equity versus excellence in mind may help you as you're kind of starting to advocate for your child. So your first step in the process is to gather some information. I typically recommend starting with that conversation with your student. Talk to them. What are their frustrations? What are their joys in school? Are they being appropriately stretched and challenged? Are they bored? How are they connecting with other students in their grade? When they first come home from school, come running through that door and are so excited to talk with you, what are the things that they're sharing? what are those highs and lows in their days? As teens, they may not come running in the door ready to share, but as you have your conversations with them, what are the highs? What are the lows that they're experiencing? Um, are they feeling that they're being adequately challenged? How are they connecting with other students as well? So regardless of where your child is age-wise, these are some of the things that you'll need to be collecting from them, asking them about, and keeping notes on. And I do recommend taking notes, writing this all down, typing it out, however it works best for you to do that, whether it's pen and paper or on in your computer. You do need to write that down so that you have kind of a written record and can reflect back on that. And then the next step then would be to consider and look into whether or not your school has a high ability program. Probably the easiest way to go about that is to first just check the school and or corporation website. It's typically listed there. Most schools, I think, are putting that out there. So that's where I would start. If you're unable to find that on the website, then a call to the school would definitely get that information for you. Some of the things that then you'll want to consider. So if your school system does not have a high ability program, I would ask them about different options. Are they offering differentiation in the classroom? Do they support enrichment programs, whether in or outside of school? Do they offer acceleration, whether that's content, subject, or grade acceleration? And what are the options for independent work or supplementing what they're doing through outside sources? If they do have a high ability program, your step then is to look at how are students identified? What's that process? What year does identification take place? What year does the high ability program begin? Is there identification permitted throughout the school year, or is it just at a very specific point in time? Are additional testing options available for those who may show as borderline on whatever their testing process is? Are they using multifaceted assessment? And are they utilizing national, state, or local norms? It's typically best if the school is utilizing those local norms, because that is students within that area instead of utilizing students from the whole state or even the whole nation for that identification purpose. But keeping it there on the local level is typically best. Are nominations allowed? And if so, who can do or offer those nominations? And then is the actual identification process evaluated by an individual, or is it evaluated by a committee? So these are some of the things that you're going to want to gather in your information seeking. So once a student is identified, then what happens? So that next piece of information you need then is, how are identified students then served? Are the services in the content area only, or are the services in other areas too? Are the students being educated in a self-contained classroom or in an honor section for high ability students only? Are they being served in a pull-out program, an inclusion program? So how are they receiving those services? And then looking at the teachers themselves, have they received specialized training to work with high ability students? Have they received a licensure in gifted education? Are they receiving ongoing professional development? Because we hope that our teachers of high ability students are receiving specialized training, receiving their licensures and professional development, so that they are being they're able to provide the best quality service to our high ability students. And then look at the curriculum. Are they simply using the same curriculum, just giving extra work? Or are they utilizing a curriculum that's specific for high ability students that provides a depth and a breadth to the education and allows them to make connections across multiple domains? There are lots of questions to ask and lots of information to gather. So here are just a few additional things to help you prepare. First, I would keep a portfolio that reflects your child's skill development. This can include copies of tests. It can include copies of written graded homework assignments, independent projects that they've done, awards, lists of extracurricular activities that they've participated in, enrichment programs that they've participated in, copies of any standardized testing, and so forth. If your child is on the younger side, perhaps kindergarten, first grade, keeping copies of artwork that they've done, stories that they've developed, whether that is a story that you've written down or helped them to write down, or a story that you have an audio or video recording of. Those are excellent pieces to add into that. I also, for our children that are upper elementary, middle, and high. You can do it for all ages, but specifically, I would recommend for that upper elementary, middle, and high school, that keeping a record of those, and I think I mentioned this earlier, of those highs and lows that they're experiencing. I would add that to the portfolio too, the things that they're talking about when they get home from school, the things that they're sharing with you, and your observations of them. I also recommend, if at all possible, either joining, or if one isn't available for you to join, creating a support system or a support group where you can share concerns, you can share resources, and give each other the support that you need as you're working through these different processes and experiences that you're going to have on this high ability journey. There are some really fantastic state and national organizations that are specifically for high ability students that have wonderful information and support systems. On that resource screen that I shared earlier, you saw the one for the Indiana Association for Gifted, as well as the National Association for Gifted Children. Those are the Indiana State and the national organizations. Two very, very good ones that I would recommend at least checking out their websites for, and again, you can get some great information just from those sites. And then finally, I think it's really important to know the myths that exist out there about high ability students. I have a couple that I'm going to share with you that are on the next slide, but please know that these are just a couple of the myths that exist out there, that there are quite a few. And so working with these in local and state organizations, as well as any other support groups, will be a fantastic way to identify other myths that exist. So one of the myths that exists out there is that high ability students should be given large quantities of work at the same average grade level. When in reality, it's not the quantity of work that needs to adapt, but it's the level of the academic challenge that needs to adapt. High ability students need a high degree of academic challenge, and a larger quantity of the regular workload is not going to provide them with that academic rigor that they need. Another myth is that high ability students learn best on their own. I think so. There are some students that exist working well independently, others that work well in groups, working collaboratively. The important concept here with this, though, is that high ability students benefit from being grouped with other intellectual peers for a significant portion of their day. And the reasons behind that are because being with their intellectual peers, they can have those conversations at the academic degree level that they need to have them at. They can express those different concepts in different ways with their intellectual peers. And so while they may prefer to learn best on their own or learn best in groups or collaboratively, the key is being with those intellectual peers for a significant portion of the day. Another myth is that high ability students will make straight A's. And if you saw one of our earlier episodes on understanding a high ability student, I believe it was, you'll know or remember that that's not necessarily the case. High ability students are not always going to perform well in school, especially if they're unmotivated or unchallenged. For our high ability students, getting that A is not the most important thing. Now, for our high achievers, that's definitely one of the most important things. But our high ability students, the learning is the most important piece. And so again, they're not chasing that A, they're chasing knowledge. And if they are feeling unmotivated or unchallenged, they may put off doing the work or not follow every step that sometimes instructors need to see because they're able to jump from point A to point C and know the answer without writing down all those steps in between. So again, they're not always going to make those straight A's. Another myth is that high ability students are socially popular with their peers. Just because they're high ability does not mean they're going to be popular. High ability students are often socially ostracized, especially at that secondary education level. We find a lot that students that are high ability will begin masking, hiding their intellect, hiding their desire to learn, their interest in topics in order to try to fit in and not stand out as that high ability student. Another myth is that high ability students are from upper middle class professional homes. Certainly they can be, but high ability students come from all homes, all different types of racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic backgrounds. High ability does not mean that they're necessarily going to come from one specific neighborhood, one specific family type. They're from all types. And then the last one I'm going to mention of our myths is that extra attention given to high ability students fosters snobbery and is likely to lead to an elitist class. The fact is that giftedness it's fragile. And every child deserves an education that's appropriate to their individual needs. Children at both extremes of the educational spectrum and at every single spot in between deserve education that is appropriate to their needs. It's not going to create snobbery or elitism unless that is something that is projected through the individual school system. So how do we start those conversations? I first want to make sure to suggest that you start first with the teacher. It's usually best not to jump straight to the top. I know that sometimes we think that we'll get it done fast, let's go to the top. It's really best to start with the teacher first. That is the person that is having the most daily interaction with your child. So they're seeing how your child is performing, how they're interacting, and all of those different key aspects and even nuances that are going to be important as you are working through this journey. So start with the teacher. Set up a time to come in and talk with them. When you come in to talk, you're going to bring that portfolio with you. So you have all of the examples, you have your observations, you have copies of the homework and so forth. You have all of that there so that you can go over that with them and share with them what your observations are. And then it's important to ask them, what are their observations? What are they seeing in terms of how your student is performing, not only academically, but when are they getting most excited about projects or homework or learning aspects? When do they seem to begin to withdraw or kind of mentally check out during learning moments? And so see what their observations are. I would also suggest asking in that meeting if there are additional opportunities for your child to pursue their individual interests, their individual skills and passions and so forth. During the meeting, it's really important to focus on your child's needs and not the school district's failings. I'm a parent too. Like I mentioned, I have 4 kids. They've gone through multiple different school systems, and it's easy to look at and kind of point to what we see as or perceive as shortcomings within the school systems. But focusing on that is actually going to detract from what you're trying to do in this meeting. And that's making sure that your child's needs are being met. And so really, really work hard to keep everything focused on that and steer clear of those shortcomings. Keep the tone positive. That goes such a long way, especially if you're meeting with the teacher at the end of their academic day. Keeping that tone positive really does help. Have a specific goal in mind. But while you have that specific goal in mind, it's important to keep an open mind about other approaches, other opportunities. Ideally, when you leave this meeting, you're going to have a written plan or working toward that written plan for how your child's needs are going to be served within the educational environment. Don't be afraid to ask for your child to be evaluated, or if they've been evaluated previously, don't hesitate asking for them to be evaluated again or to have a different type of evaluation. For example, particularly with younger children, using an exam that focuses not on, that uses pictures and more so than it uses words, can really be helpful as their language development is still coming along. There are other reasons to do that as well, but that's one of them. So there are those different types of tests, so it's okay to ask for a different one to be administered as well. And then if you're unable to get your child's needs met within that meeting, it's okay to ask them to meet with the next level administrator. Again, don't jump straight to that. You're going to want to try to work with the teacher first. But if you're not able to get your child's needs met, then it's reasonable to ask for a meeting with that next level administrator. And again, you're going to be prepared. You're going to stay focused on your child's needs, steering clear of any district failings. You're still going to remain positive about the educational opportunities that are being provided, but expressing those needs that your child has for additional opportunities or additional or different delivery methods. If faced with a resistant administration, then it is okay to escalate and to talk with the central office and or the superintendent. So you're just going to want to make sure that you're not immediately escalating to the very tip top, but that you're taking gradual steps so that you're just being appropriate in the steps that you're taking. We'll just leave that there. Again, utilizing with each of those meetings the same steps of staying focused on your child's needs, being positive, bringing your portfolio, sharing your examples, your observations. And if you have had to escalate, you now have your teacher's or your child's teacher's observations as well, because you've asked that. You've asked those questions, and so you can document that and move that into the next level of meetings. So I mentioned at the beginning of this episode that I'd be sharing with you a checklist from the book Gifted Children Decoded. And so that's what you see on your screen now. So let's just read through that checklist together, shall we? Define your child's needs and desired outcomes. Gather credible information and documentation. And that's what we were talking about in terms of that portfolio. Familiarize yourself with educational policies and legal rights. So that's reviewing your school and corporation's websites, looking at the high ability program, as well as any of the school policies in terms of identification and service delivery. Practice clear and concise communication. Establish respectful boundaries and expectations with educators. You're going to stay calm and focused during discussions. And remember, stay focused on your child's needs. Set small, achievable goals and celebrate those successes. Reflect on setbacks and adjust your approach as needed. And maintain motivation and persistence. Again, I think this is a fantastic checklist, and I do recommend that book. You may be able to check it out at the library, even if you didn't want to purchase a copy. But they go into more detail with the checklist and share some other strategies as well. Again, definitely recommend. So let's kind of recap then what we've been talking about today. So advocating for your child, you're going to do your information gathering, your research. You're going to create that portfolio, have all of your examples and your observations well documented in that portfolio. And I didn't mention this before, but I would make sure that you have a copy for yourself of the portfolio and a copy that you can leave with the teacher as well, so that as they're working on a plan, that written plan, they've got that to refer back to as well. Go into those meetings knowing your school system's high ability program options, know the myths that exist out there, and know your child's needs. Those are going to give you an excellent foundation to begin those conversations. I've already mentioned doing research before heading into that. Again, just to mention, the state and national organizations can be an excellent resource for you as well. I would check those out and glean the information you can from there as well. Understand the difference between educational and curricular options that exist, and the different delivery methods that exist, so that you can be thinking about in advance what is going to best serve your child's needs. And then take with you, again, that portfolio. I've mentioned that multiple times. I'll probably mention it a few more times because it is such a key piece to having a successful conversation. During that meeting, as I've mentioned, you're going to keep a positive tone. You're going to have a specific goal in mind, but I would also stay open to other suggestions or recommendations that the teacher and or school system may offer you. Ideally, you're going to walk away from that meeting with a written plan or the written plan in progress. If the teacher's unable to address the needs and you're unable to work out something to your satisfaction, as a reminder, it is okay to escalate to the school level administrator. Again, be prepared, focused on the child's needs, not on the district's failings. And if you're faced with resistance within the school administration, then you're going to escalate. So that's just a very, very quick recap of what we've been talking about. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode as we begin talking about how to get started with advocating for your child's needs as a high ability student. If you would like to talk more with me about this, I would be happy to do so. You can see there on the screen in front of you my telephone number, my email address, and then the QR code there on the right hand side. That'll take you to my booking link, and you can schedule an in-person or virtual appointment with me, and we can talk in a more face-to-face method. But again, I'm more than happy to talk with you as you begin navigating these conversations and advocating for your child. The QR code there on the left will give you a list of any upcoming programs that are being offered by the Indiana Academy, as well as a list of all of the episodes that we've had in this series, and the links to the recordings so that you can watch those. Giftedness isn't a destination. It's a journey worth guiding. Thank you so much for taking this journey with your gifted learner.